house now, Mom. My daughter said it while folding my sweaters into a garbage bag. Not a suitcase, a garbage bag. We found you a nice place. I stood in my own kitchen and watched my life get zipped shut in black plastic. By the time this was over, Denise would learn exactly what her mother was capable of. A small brass key fell out of an envelope onto the floor that morning. Nobody noticed it but me. My name is Margaret Doyle. Everyone calls me Peggy. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years as a forensic accountant in Dayton, Ohio, tracing money that people thought was hidden well enough. Turns out it never is. If you're watching this from somewhere far from Ohio, drop your city in the comments below. I like knowing where this story ends up. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe, because what happened in my house that spring changed how I look at family for the rest of my life. Let me back up. 3 weeks before that garbage bag moment, everything was ordinary. It was a Saturday in April. My granddaughter Emily was turning 10. The party was in Denise's backyard in Kettering, just 20 minutes from my place. Pink and gold balloons taped to the fence. A folding table sagging under a sheet cake from the Kroger on Wilmington Pike. The smell of charcoal and lighter fluid drifting from Robert's grill. Somebody's dog kept stealing napkins off the table, and nobody chased it very hard. I brought a casserole dish of my green bean bake, the one with the crispy onions on top, the one Walt used to request every Thanksgiving before he passed. I set it on the table next to a bowl of chips. Denise hugged me at the gate. "You look tired, Mom," she said. I told her I was fine, just fine. Kids ran through a sprinkler, even though it was only 68 degrees out. Robert stood by the grill with a spatula, laughing too loud at something his brother said. My son Noah has always laughed a little too loud. I used to think that was just his personality. I know better now. We sang Happy Birthday. Emily blew out 10 candles in one breath, and everybody clapped. I remember thinking, this is a good day. I remember thinking that specifically because I wanted to hold on to it later. Then Denise asked me to help carry plates inside. That's when it started. The kitchen. 20 minutes later, Denise shut the sliding door behind us. The noise from the yard went muffled. "Mom, sit down for a second. I'm fine standing." "Please," I sat. Robert came in behind her, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He didn't sit. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and that told me something before he said a word. "We've been talking," Denise said, "about your living situation. My living situation is fine, Denise. I've lived in that house for 40 years. That's kind of the problem. Mom, it's a lot of house for one person, and you've been forgetting things. I forgot to bring napkins to a birthday party." "That's not a symptom." Robert cleared his throat. "There was the stove thing last month. I turned off a burner 10 minutes late. I was reading." Denise reached into a folder on the counter. I hadn't even noticed it there until that moment. A manila folder, tabbed, organized. My daughter has never organized anything in her life without a reason. "We found a place," she said. "Sunrise Meadows. It's really nice, Mom. They have a garden. Bingo on Thursdays." "I don't play bingo. That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" "Denise." She looked at Robert. He looked at the floor. "The point," Denise said, and her voice went flat in a way I didn't recognize, "is that we already put down the deposit." Silence. My own daughter's kitchen, and I couldn't hear a single sound except the hum of the refrigerator. "You did what?" "We had to move fast. They only had one opening, without asking me. We knew you'd say no. I am saying no, right now. That counts." Robert finally spoke. "Peggy, it's already done. There's paperwork. Denise has power of attorney. Remember, from when your knee surgery, that was temporary. That was for one surgery, 18 months ago." "It doesn't expire, Mom," Denise said quietly. "It's not that kind of document." That's when she said it. The line that opened this whole story. "You're an inconvenience now, Mom. We found you a nice place." She said it while pulling my good cardigan out of a kitchen drawer she must have raided earlier that week, folding it, dropping it into a black garbage bag, sitting open on a chair. Not a suitcase, a bag. I didn't cry. I want to be honest with you about that, because I know how these stories usually go. I didn't scream either. I just stood up, walked past both of them, and drove home. A small brass key sat in an envelope on my kitchen table when I got there. It had come in the mail 3 days earlier from a lawyer's office I didn't recognize. I hadn't opened it yet. I still don't fully know why I hadn't. Maybe some part of me was saving it. That night, my house, alone, I sat at my kitchen table until almost midnight. I kept asking myself if I was overreacting. Maybe Denise really was worried. Maybe the house really was too much. I'm 68, not 30. Things do slip sometimes. But then I thought about Walt. My husband died 6 years ago. Heart, sudden, no warning, gone before the ambulance made it past Woodman Drive. He was a plant manager for 30 years at a parts supplier out past the interstate. Practical man, quiet man. He used to say one thing to me over and over whenever a deal looked too easy or a person seemed too eager. Trust, but verify, Peggy. Every single time. He said it about vendors. He said it about contractors. Once he even said it about our own accountant, and it turned out he was a discrepancy. Small, but real. Walt didn't distrust people out of meanness. He just believed love and carelessness were two different things, and you shouldn't let one excuse the other. I sat there thinking about that phrase for a long time. I also thought about how fast Denise had that folder ready, how the power of attorney didn't expire, how Robert's laugh at the party had sounded a little too loud, like a man trying to fill space so nobody would ask him questions. I thought I was being paranoid. Then I thought about the brass key still sitting unopened in that envelope, and I decided, paranoid or not, I was going to look. 2 days later, my driveway, Curl Fenner lives across the street. Retired hospice nurse, 71, sharp as anything. She was trimming her hedge when I pulled in. "Peggy," she said. Not loud, just my name, low, like she'd been waiting to say it. "Hi, Carol." She set down her shears and walked halfway across the yard, glancing back at her own house first. "You seeing your daughter much these days?" Some Carol nodded slowly. "I had a home health case last year. Different family, similar story. Adult kids, aging parent, a real nice retirement community they were awful eager to move her into." She paused. "You should ask about the key, Peggy, before you sign anything at all." "What key?" She just looked at me. "You'll know when you find it." She picked her shears back up and went back to the hedge like she hadn't said anything at all. I didn't tell her about the envelope on my table. I don't know how she knew to say that word. Maybe she didn't know anything specific. Maybe it was just an old nurse's instinct, the kind you get after 30 years of watching families fall apart in hospital hallways. Either way, I went inside and finally opened the envelope. Investigation, the next 3 weeks. Inside the envelope was a letter from an attorney named Franklin Reyes and a small brass key. The letter explained that my late husband Walt had opened a safety deposit box 11 years earlier, before he died, under a trust he'd set up quietly with Mr. Reyes's father, the original attorney, now retired. The trust had never been touched. The box was at a bank on Far Hills Avenue I hadn't set foot in for over a decade. I sat with that letter for a long time. Walt never told me, not once, in 38 years of marriage. I didn't know whether to be angry or grateful. I decided I'd figure that out later. Right then, I had a different fire to put out. I called the bank where Denise and I had a joint account, the one I'd added her 2 years ago for convenience, in case something happened to me. The teller, a young man named Diego, pulled up my statements while I waited on hold. "Ma'am, I'm showing 3 transfers out of savings in the last 4 months. 12,000 total. Transfers to where? An account ending in 4,471. I didn't recognize the number. Denise did not have my permission for that." 3 days later, I sat in the office of an elder law attorney named Susan Whitcomb, off Far Hills, not far from the bank. Small office, plants on the windowsill, a box of tissues on the desk that told me she'd seen plenty of people cry in that chair. The power of attorney they're citing, she said, sliding a copy across the desk. Was it filed with the county? I don't know, because this signature, she tapped the bottom of the page, doesn't match the sample you gave me. Not even close. I stared at it. My name, but not my handwriting. Not even close. Mrs. Doyle, I want to be very direct with you. This looks like forgery. Combined with the unauthorized transfers, we may be looking at financial elder abuse. That's a felony in Ohio. She's my daughter. I understand. That doesn't change what the document shows. I asked her what I should do. Gather everything first, she said. Bank records, this document, any texts or voicemails. Ohio is a one-party consent state, so if you're part of the conversation, you're allowed to record it yourself. Build the picture before you confront anyone. Once people know you're looking, they stop leaving trails. So that's what I did. For 2.5 weeks, I gathered bank statements, a copy of the forged POA, certified by the county recorder, filed 6 weeks earlier without my knowledge, a voicemail from Robert to a real estate agent about getting the Woodbourne Avenue property appraised soon, before the paperwork clears, left on a number he must not have realized, still forwarded to my old cell, the one I'd handed down to Emily for emergencies, and then, out of habit, kept linked to my email. And I found the deed research. Robert had been quietly asking a title company about my house. 40 years paid off since 2009, and my son-in-law was pricing it like a listing. I also went to the bank on Far Hills Avenue and opened Walt's box. Inside was a second trust document, a life insurance policy nobody had ever mentioned, worth $240,000, and a short letter in his handwriting. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. It was for me, but the last line stuck with me through everything that came after. If anyone ever tries to make decisions for you, Peggy, remember you're sharper than all of them combined. Verify everything. I love you. I cried reading that. First time through this whole ordeal, I let myself do it. Then I called Susan Whitcomb and said I was ready. Confrontation, Sunday dinner, 4 weeks after the birthday party. I asked Denise to come to my house for dinner. Told her I wanted to talk about the assisted living place, that maybe I was ready to consider it. I'm not proud of the lie. I needed everyone in one room. Denise came. Robert came. My son David flew in from Charlotte because I'd called him the week before and told him everything. David hadn't spoken to Robert in almost 2 years over an old argument about money, and when I told him what I'd found, he went quiet on the phone for a long time before saying, "I'll be there Sunday." Susan Whitcomb sat at my dining table too, in a blazer, a folder in front of her, exactly like the one Denise had brought to that kitchen 4 weeks earlier. I'd asked her to. We ate pot roast. Small talk about Emily's school play. Robert laughed loud at nothing again. Then I set my fork down. I want to talk about the power of attorney. Denise's shoulders relaxed slightly. I'm glad, Mom. I really think Sunrise Meadows. I want to talk about the one that isn't real. The room went still. What are you talking about? Denise's voice came out thinner than before. Susan slid the certified copy across the table. Mrs. Doyle, your mother's signature was compared against 3 notarized documents on file with the county. It's not a match. Denise's face didn't move for a second. Then her jaw tightened. Robert stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. This is insane. Peggy, we were trying to help you by transferring $12,000 out of my savings into an account ending in 4,471. I asked, whose account is that? Robert. He didn't answer. By calling a real estate agent about my house before any paperwork even cleared. I set the printed voicemail transcript on the table. Denise's hands started shaking. Mom, I can explain by pricing an appraisal on Woodbourne Avenue, I said, before your own mother had agreed to anything at all. David hadn't said a word this whole time. He just watched Robert's face crack, piece by piece, the color draining out of it. We were in debt, Denise finally said, barely above a whisper. The restaurant Robert invested in. It failed. Mom, it failed bad. And we didn't know how to tell you. And the house, your house, it's worth so much now. And we thought, if you were somewhere safe, taken care of, we could just sell my life out from under me, I said, while I was still living in it. Nobody spoke for almost a full minute. Emily's birthday balloons were still deflating somewhere in that backyard 4 weeks later. And I remember thinking, absurdly, that they'd probably still be there when all of this was finally over. Consequence, cascade. I'm not going to walk you through every single legal step, but I'll give you the shape of it. Susan filed a report with Ohio's Adult Protective Services within the week. A financial crimes detective from the Kettering Police Department, a calm, tired-looking man named Detective Okafor, opened an investigation 2 weeks after that. The forged power of attorney was voided by the probate court in June. The bank froze the account, ending in 4,471, which turned out to belong to Robert alone, and it held just over $9,000 of the 12 I'd traced. Robert was charged with forgery and theft from a person in a protected class, which in Ohio, when the victim is over 65, escalates the offense. He took a plea deal in October, 18 months probation, mandatory restitution, and he lost his job at the insurance office in Beaver Creek once his employer found out about the charges. His name was in the Dayton Daily News for 1 week in November. I didn't feel good reading it. I didn't feel bad either. Mostly, I just felt tired. Denise wasn't charged. Detective Okafor told me the forgery pointed clearly to Robert's handwriting analysis, and Denise cooperated fully once things came apart, handing over emails and messages that showed the plan had mostly been his. That didn't make her innocent in my eyes. It just meant the law drew its own lines, separate from mine. She and Robert separated in January. Emily split time between them. I saw my granddaughter every other weekend after that, which was more than I'd seen her most months before any of this happened. Denise didn't speak to me for 4 months. 2 years later, I still live in the house on Woodbourne Avenue. 42 years now. Emily is 12. She stays with me most Fridays. Last spring, I gave her the small brass key. I'd used the money from Walt's trust, the insurance policy I never knew existed, to buy back a little cabin up near Hocking Hills that used to belong to Walt's family before it sold off in the 80s. 40 acres, a 2-room cabin, a creek running along the back edge of the property. I put it in a trust for Emily, the way Walt had once done quietly for me. The key on the ribbon opens the cabin door. I gave it to her on a Friday afternoon in April, almost exactly 2 years after that birthday party in Denise's backyard. What's it for, Grandma? For remembering, I told her that nobody gets to decide your worth for you. Not even people who love you. Denise and I talk now, not the way we used to. Something quieter. She apologized to me last spring, sitting on my back porch, crying in a way I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. I believe the apology was real. I also believe some things, once they happen, leave a mark that doesn't fully fade, and I've made peace with that. The lesson I took from all of it is simple, and I think Walt would have said it better than I can, but here it is anyway. Love doesn't give anyone the right to make your decisions for you. If someone truly loves you, they ask. They don't just hand you a garbage bag and call it help. So let me ask you something before you go. If your own family tried to write you out of your own life, would you have seen it coming? And what would you have done differently than I did? Tell me where you're watching this from. Tell me what you'd have done in that kitchen, standing there with your sweaters going into a garbage bag instead of a suitcase. And if this story meant something to you, subscribe to The Quiet Rise. There are more stories like mine coming. Some of them might hit closer to home than you expect. I'll see you in the next one.